Hey there, and welcome to the Get Career Curious podcast. If you've ever wondered what it's really like to build a creative, purpose-driven career in architecture, this episode is for you. Today, we're diving into the world of design with Amanda Orsillo, a Colorado Springs-based architect who turned her passion for art and creativity into a career that she truly loves. Amanda's journey began in high school when a simple career survey led her towards architecture. Fast forward to today, and she's running her own architecture firm, designing everything from award-winning zoo exhibits to the coolest restaurants in town. But Amanda's story isn't just about blueprints and buildings. It's about finding fulfillment, working with amazing clients, and creating spaces that bring people together. So let's dive in. Hi, Amanda.
Hi,
Thanks so
Marita.
much for being on the show today.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
So you're our first architect, and I think a lot of people are interested in this career. So when did you first become interested in becoming an architect?
I say it was in high school. I always loved art and creative things. And at one point, my mom, I think probably a lot like you, was concerned about where's my career going as an artist. And so she had me do an evaluation. And honestly, it was so long ago, I don't remember what the test was, but architecture popped up as one of the skills or careers that would be a good fit with my interests and my strengths. And so I signed up for a drafting class in high school and enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't awesome, but that was just sort of like the jumping off start, I'd say, for me was in high school, and with her prompting at looking at some different
opportunities
Mhm.
with an artistic flair.
Yes.
And so did you go to college and study architecture?
Yeah. So it's a professional career. You have to have a license to practice. And to get a license, you either have to go to an accredited school for 4 or 5, 6 years, depending on the program. So I did. I went to Ball State University, and at the time they had a 5-year accredited program that I attended.
So 5 years is an additional one from the normal college experience. So do most people go into the program knowing they want to do this right out of high school, or can you transfer in after you've gotten some gen eds done?
Yeah, you could. So most people do, at least at my school, you start year number 1 and they have more general design classes, and then you would pick your specific area of interest, whether it's landscape architecture, urban planning, or architecture. And so the first year was sort of to like wrap your head around, what was out there. And then after that, you sort of declare your major.
And which one did you pick?
Architecture.
Architecture.
Yeah.
So is that the broadest one?
No, urban planning, they do more designing with zoning and planning and more kind of infrastructure, and landscape architecture is obviously more with plants and so then architecture is, really just buildings and interiors.
When you're looking at university or college architecture programs, what are some of the things you should consider?
Yeah. So colleges can be one of two things. They're either accredited or they're not accredited. And so if you attend an accredited university, it's usually a 5-year, maybe a 6-year program. That immediately gets you hours and experience towards your licensure. If you attend a non-accredited school, for instance, one of the schools here in Colorado, I believe, has a 4-year non-accredited program, you would then have to attend another 2-year accredited master's program. And then you could move forward with your licensure, practicing so many hours. If you don't attend an accredited program, typically you have to practice for way more hours after you graduate before you can sit for your exams.
Oh, so that's an important thing to kind of research if you're interested in architecture going into college.
Yeah, it really is. So I think you need to pay attention to those things. Is my school accredited? Isn't it? Typically, they go through accreditation once every 4 or 5 years or something. I would definitely advise somebody interested in architecture to look for an accredited program.
So that's super great advice. Did you do any internships in college?
I did.
Do they offer those?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was actually required that we
Okay.
do a whole semester and a summer. So our fourth year, they required an internship, and I interned with a firm called Olson Sunberg, and they're based in Seattle. They're called Olson Kundig now. I think they've gone through a few name changes, but they're a fabulous firm, do amazing design, and I was really just blessed to be able to work with them.
And so as an architectural intern, what are some of the projects you would work on?
Well, at that time, it was a lot of just drafting, kind of grunt work,
Yeah.
like doing door details and bathroom details. It was really at the beginning of 3D modeling, like computer modeling. And so we weren't doing a lot of that. So they would have the interns actually making models at the time. So we'd be cutting out little pieces. That firm had a really amazing culture, especially with their intern development program. And so they wanted everybody to have a little experience with everything, whether it was modeling or drafting or going on site visits, or they also had an education program. So they would have somebody come in once a week. We would stay after on Wednesdays and have a speaker. And then we actually had to do a presentation too on something that was interesting to us.
So it was probably a great learning experience and gave you a little bit more in-depth knowledge of what you wanted to focus on once you got out.
For sure. Yeah, it definitely was.
And then what was your first job out of college as an architect?
So my last year in college, I actually did a kind of a study abroad, and I wasn't too sure that I actually wanted to go into architecture. And so I actually took a job doing marketing, web design, graphic design. And then after about a year of doing that, I was like, I think I want to go back into architecture. So I actually started working with a firm here in Colorado Springs, and it was just a lot of drafting and learning about what real practice looked like, day to day.
You've been into your career for a number of years now.
Yeah.
So can you talk about some of the projects you've worked on? For instance, I've seen the exhibit at the zoo.
Mm-hmm.
That was a number of years ago. How did that come about? What was your part in the exhibit?
So I went out on my own, and so I started practicing on my own. And I had done a few smaller projects with the zoo, but they were looking for an architect to help them with their Australia renovation. So that included the budgies, which are their birds, wallabies, alligators, a tree kangaroo, their emu. So it was kind of a big, like a comprehensive thing. And so it was so much fun. They are a very unique client, and I got to do some really, not everybody gets to design a building for birds every day. So, I had a lot of challenges, but I think it was one of the most rewarding projects I've worked on in a long time.
So in that space, and we're talking about the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo here, they hired you and said, look, we want to redesign a kind of outdated and boring exhibit.
Yep.
And it's really cool now. Do they ask you to do the building drawings or come up with the overall look and feel of the entire exhibit?
Yeah.
Technically, how does it work?
I worked with them for the site design, because it's multiple buildings on one site, right? And so it's a full experience, both in the building and walking around and seeing everything. And so they kind of knew where they wanted to position the different buildings on the site. And so I worked with them with that. And then really, I just came up with the building designs based on some smaller parameters that they had given me, but really the whole building design, I showed them probably 2 or 3 different concepts, and then they sort of picked one, and we refined it several times, and then we ran with that.
And then on top of doing that, did you do some interior design as well for the reptile exhibit?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And that was fun because I really don't like snakes. But so they have the reptile and snake building as well. And that was one of the original buildings at the zoo. So it had some historical significance. It's a really beautiful building. But we went in and kind of gutted the inside. And designed, like, what does it look like to go through this building? Where do we put the snakes? Because not everybody wants to go see snakes. So, that room is a little bit separated. And so there was a lot of planning that went along with that. They do a lot of their own enclosure design, like the snake, the actual enclosure, and what does that look like, and what does a snake need, and what's a reptile need, and that kind of stuff. But I work with them with that, yeah.
What impressed me most when you go through that building is it's so aesthetically pleasing, like the paintings, the pictures on the wall with the color of the rocks in the exhibits. It all really flowed beautifully and was a very, very unique exhibit for reptiles.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen anything as pretty.
The concept was actually like a jewel box. They wanted, their keepers had this idea of creating each enclosure as like a jewel box. And so that was sort of the jumping off point.
Well, it came off pretty flawlessly, because that is actually how I would describe it.
Yeah,
so
it's fun.
So what are some other architectural projects that you've enjoyed doing, so listeners can see the breadth of projects you work on?
Yeah. I'd say, like, got my feet wet with doing sort of inline retail. I mean, strip malls, for lack of a better description. But that would be a ground up building, so it's not just an interior design, it's designing the entire building as a shell, the roofs and the walls and all the materials on the outside and the structure and everything that's associated with that. And so I've done several of those in the past. And then lately, I've been doing a lot more interior work, tenant improvement work, which is just only on the inside of an existing building. And so lots of restaurants I've been working on, which is a lot of fun. I get to do a lot more interior design, a lot more creative things with that. Hair salons are always fun because I think, people want to go in and experience like a beautiful space, right? In the fun and interesting space.
Especially when you're getting your hair done.
Right. Yeah.
So what would you say is some of the skills that you look for in an architect? So if someone's coming into this field, what are some natural things that people who are architects kind of have?
I think a kind of innate sense of space is important. Like how a space goes together needs to make sense. For instance, years ago, I worked on the Sky Sox ballpark. I mean, this was a really long time ago, but way before it was renovated. We did that probably 20 years ago, but you couldn't find the entrance to the building. It was like, well, okay, how do we clue in the user to follow this path without having to go, okay, where am I going? Looking at a sign, and it should be obvious. But I think the person needs a sense of space and logic that goes with that.
Thinking about your career, what are your favorite aspects of your job?
I love working with great clients. I had the chance to renovate Cowboy Star recently, and that was an example of a great client. They were just excited about the project and doing something different and making their space better, and they were just enthusiastic about it, and we worked great as a team. I'm working with a few other restaurants right now that they're just fun. They're just really fun to work with. Just the process, make the design process is easy.
And on the flip, what are some of the more challenging parts of being an architect?
Yeah, I would say meeting budgets of owners. Yeah, that's a really challenging, obviously, aspect. And especially as an architect, I don't always know, the cost of construction, and a lot of people are saying, well, how much is this going to cost? Well, really the contractor is your best person to talk to about that. I have an idea of, in general, finishes, and I'm not going to specify a really high-end finish when I know that the client has a lower-end budget. So, but I'd say the balance of good design and meeting a budget, there's kind of a sweet spot in there that's sometimes hard to meet.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially with the current construction costs. Everything's like way more expensive than anyone would guess.
Changing like almost daily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's tough. So can you give an example of a project you're helping with, say, a redesign of a restaurant?
Mhm.
What is your role and who do you work with and what does the team look like?
Yeah. So usually I am contacted by the owner of the restaurant, and we'll, for a specific remodel, we'll walk the space, talk about what works, what doesn't work, what are your goals. A lot of times it's okay, we need to reimagine the bar, or we need to add seating, or we need to completely redo the kitchen if the kitchen isn't working. Or and so we walk the space, we talk about their goals, and then I usually bring on a mechanical, plumbing, and electrical engineer um
Okay.
to work with me. So we'll establish the goals. I'll create a preliminary floor plan. The Usually we go back and forth a couple times with the owner, and then once that's ironed out, I bring on the mechanical, plumbing, and electrical engineer, and then they do all the design for that. And so that's kind of the design team. It's usually the owner, the MEP engineer, and myself. And then we bring in the contractor usually after that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And talk about how AI is helping your business because I'm sure there's a lot more technology support to do designs or imagine spaces.
Yeah.
So
There
how's that
are, and
evolving?
I'm just starting to get into that, but it's moving quite fast as it is for, most fields. But I have started working with a couple of kind of conceptual rendering programs. So, you can give it some prompts or you could give it an image. For instance, the program I work with is a 3-dimensional design program. And so I can create sort of a very basic 3-dimensional rendering of something that I'm working on. And like if I'm stumped, I'm like, oh, this just isn't working right, or I need some kind of a fresh idea. I can upload an image, say, here's where I am. And then I can give it a series of prompts like, modern, clean aesthetic, wood siding, whatever kind of images or aesthetic that I feel, and it'll kind of create something. And I don't think design wise, I couldn't just upload something and say, okay, here's your project. But, it can help me with creativity, I think.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard of from a lot of people who are
Yes.
in more creative fields is
It's a tool for.
it's a tool to give you some extra ideas maybe you didn't think of, and there might be one particular element that you bring in and say, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that, and that'd be cool." But yeah.
Yeah, but not I don't think it's a replacement, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your career, you spent how many years working for a firm, and then how long have you been on your own?
Yeah. So I spent about 5 years working for another firm,
Okay.
and that's required to get licensed.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to have a certain number of hours practicing different skills, whether it's, drafting or proposal writing or construction administration, things like that. And then you can sit for your exams. And it's a series of, I don't remember, 5, 7 exams, I believe, to get licensed. And then
That's a lot of exams.
it
And
is.
I assume if you don't pass one, you have to retake and wait until you pass all of them.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think you have to wait about a month or two, 30 days or something before you can retake it. It's a lot of exams. So, I would say the licensure process takes, maybe 6 months. And that's, if you pass most of them the first time.
Yes.
And then I
Yeah.
started my own firm after that. I got a lot of experience working for a firm before I went out on my own. Just do it. It was kind of every man for himself at that firm, which was I'd say a blessing in disguise, because at the time I was like, well, I need a little guidance. But I was just thrown into the deep end, and I just got a ton of personal experience kind of managing things and designing and, doing things on my own. So that gave me the confidence, I think, to go out on my own about 20 years ago. So
Looking at starting out of college, you've just got certified. What advantages are there to working with firms? Like, what should someone look for when they're working for a firm?
that's a great question. The firm that I had the opportunity to intern with in college had a great firm culture. And so they were always wanting to educate their staff. They wanted to provide them new experiences. I would say look for a firm that cares about its staff, cares about its clients, and wants to do something, to always improve the experience for both. Yeah, and not be stagnant. Okay, got to go to work, and I'm doing these drawings, and everybody wants to leave by 5. There are firms out there who they have weekly get-togethers, and they have this amazing culture of learning and of sharing advice and design and
probably mentorship.
Yeah,
too, right?
mentorship for sure. So I would look for a firm that offers that, and you'll know it when you see it. I mean, when you walk in, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you are a little unique in that you do both the architecture and the interior design, and kind of how you chose that path?
Yeah. So I love interior design. And most people would go to school for one or the other, and not both.
Right.
I've just kind of learned things on the way. But what I like about it is the big picture, right? If I just design the basics of a restaurant, I don't get to do all the pretty stuff, and so the finishes and the furnishings and the lighting and things like that is what I think really makes the space. And part of me wants to have control over all of it, and so that's why I like to do it. And then the other part is that's also like the really creative end of it as well, just like the finishing touches on it. So
yeah, and I think when you go into a space as a customer and you see all the design, like the artwork and the finishes and just the overall aesthetics, that's what really wows you. And it's probably less the architectural design, even though that makes up a space, So
it's the bones,
I think
right?
It's the bones. So I think it's very fun that you get to do both aspects and really get to see the project completely through.
Yeah, I'm definitely lucky to be able to do that on a lot of projects. Some people, want to just do their own interior design.
Right.
They say, "Oh, we don't want that included in our scope of work for you," and that's okay. But why not hire a professional?
Yeah, I know. So, what are some misconceptions about becoming an architect?
That's a funny question. I would say the biggest, and that's people ask me, what do you do? And I'm an architect. And people always say, oh, I wanted to be an architect, or, but I'm not good in math. And that to me is one of the biggest misconceptions, because I'm not good at math. My husband laughs at me. He's like, oh my gosh, you can't do this in your head. No, I need a calculator. I would say that's one of the biggest misconceptions. It's not especially with, computers and AI and, automation. But, you don't have to be good at math. You need to understand concepts, and if I can write something down and figure that out, but it's not like I have to have it inherently like in my head. So
that's so good to know. So what would people think math would be involved? Like doing the drawings?
I don't actually know. I don't know what do you need math? There are a lot. I do a lot of math, like occupant load calculations and allowable air. These are kind of like technical code things that I have to do.
Right.
But there's there are outlines and formulas for that. I don't have to come up with it myself. I can plug in the numbers and make it work. And so I guess that's what I mean. I don't have to make up these numbers out of nowhere. There's a formula. I can follow a formula, and that's,
That's so good to know. If you were looking at this career as a young person and feeling kind of intimidated because this is going to be a 5-year program, and then maybe like you get out of the program and you're not quite sure you want to do it.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to young people?
I would say don't give up, first of all. It's hard work. School was difficult. It was a lot of hours. You talk to any architect and they say, oh my gosh, you have studio, and that's where you spend all night there regularly, working on projects. And it's a lot of work, and can be daunting, but I think it's a great education, first of all, for lots of things, even if you don't want to become an architect. I have a lot of friends that finished the program, got their degree, and then didn't go into architecture and went on to do other creative things that I think the architectural experience really helped them with, even in their career today, even if it's not as an architect. So don't give up. Work hard. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you pretty happy with the career choice you made, or do you see changes in your future that, you take your career a different direction?
Yeah. I honestly can't imagine doing anything else. I love it. I was telling a client yesterday, I was like, I can't even imagine retiring. I love what I do. It's so much fun. And, I have deadlines and I'll feel a burden to complete that, but it's not, I don't go to work and be like, oh, I hate work, but because I love it. It's just, it's fun, and every day is different, and every project is different. Even, you're familiar with one of the restaurants that I work on, and even though we're doing, several of the same restaurant, every single one is different and has different challenges and has different, slightly different aesthetics, and so it's fun, and I enjoy that. I'm not bored, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I love hearing that, because there's a lot of people who don't love their job and every day kind of dread. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
Dread it. And it's so fun when you can talk to someone who just loves their job and, and has a career that you really do have longevity in owning your own architectural firm.
Yeah.
You can do this for as long as you want, and you can scale your business up and down as you see fit. That is a really cool aspect of owning your own
it is
firm.
And challenge of owning your own firm. I'm sure you probably understand the challenges of hiring people, or so I have kind of kept my firm small so far, but I don't know what's in the future.
So speaking of that, what is your favorite part of owning your own firm?
Oh, definitely flexibility in my schedule. Part of why I started my own firm was because I'd go to work and I didn't have anything to do, and it was, why am I here? But this is crazy. I need to work when I need to, or
your breaks.
And then when I don't need to, I have the flexibility to do other things, like developmental things, like research, or we have to do continuing education, and I can do that on my own time as a
And then on the flip, what you like least about owning your own business?
I would definitely say administration, because I have to wear all the hats, right? So
like bookkeeping is something I hate.
Oh, me too. It's terrible, and I put it off, and then it's a challenge. Bookkeeping, proposal writing isn't my favorite. I get it done, but it's just, I like
that's so fun.
Contracts. Yeah. So I would say that wearing all the hats is a little challenging.
It is. So what advice do you have to someone who's in high school or early on in college looking at careers? How would you advise them to find a career that they love?
Well, honestly, I think having that survey that my mom had me do was very helpful. And so finding what your skills are early, and then trying to, or your skills or interests, right? And then trying to match that with something. I think a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to go to school for this or that. And maybe because my family does it or whatever. And I think finding something you're passionate about, and being open to that evolving too.
Amanda, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your insights. And for people who listen and who are interested in learning more about you and the work you've done, and because we've talked about several of your projects on the show, what's your website address and where could they reach out?
Yeah, it's orsillodesign.com. And I think there's a link there to shoot me an email. And I would be happy to talk to anybody about their questions or, curiosities about architecture. As a sole proprietor, I'm a little bit different than most, firms, as far as the day-to-day experience. But, I'd be happy to talk to anybody about any questions that they have.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Get Career Curious. Our goal is to help listeners discover meaningful careers that bring them joy and purpose. Before you go, let's recap a few key takeaways that Amanda shared about building a fulfilling career in architecture. First, follow your interests and strengths. Amanda's journey began with a love for art and creativity, proving that your passions can shape your career path, even if you don't have it all figured out in high school. Second, choosing an accredited architecture program is crucial for a smoother path to licensure and less overall time in school. Third, it's not all about math. One of the biggest misconceptions Amanda debunked was that you don't need to be a math whiz to succeed in architecture. Creative problem solving, spatial awareness, and collaboration are just as important. Last, Amanda finds joy in working with great clients, tackling unique challenges, and creating spaces that bring people together. Her advice: don't give up. Work hard and pursue what excites you, because loving what you do makes all the difference. Interested in seeing some of the cool projects that Amanda's worked on? Check out her portfolio on her website at orsillodesign.com. If you have a friend that might benefit from today's episode with Amanda, please share this with them. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to this podcast for more real-world advice on careers. Thank you again for joining me, Marita McCahill, on this episode of Get Career Curious. I'll see you next time.